Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. So thank you for coming to this session. Our speaker is Alanna Nafziger, and she is a descendant of Logan City's founding settlers and has lived in Cache Valley for 35 years. She is an experienced organic farmer with a bachelor's in sustainable agriculture and a master's degree in landscape architecture from Utah State University. Alanna holds a deep understanding of living on the land, long striving to implement kindness and grace while advocating for her region's quality of life. So we're going to go ahead and turn the time over to you.
Thank you so much. Welcome, everyone. As I was just introduced, but my name is Alanna Nafziger, and I'm here presenting The Living Pantry, which was my thesis research project, and it's a theoretical design exploration of affordable housing and traditional agriculture in northern Utah, specifically here in Logan. This project envisions the physical and spatial realities of addressing the issues of housing and food insecurity while strengthening our connection to the land and deeply considering how to go beyond just creating structures to how we create homes. I'd like to thank Brandon Bell and Bragg for inviting me to speak today, and everyone else who made the Cache Summit possible. So first, I'm going to go through some acknowledgements, an introduction to the research, the problems, my processes and methods, site context and analysis. We'll go through the design, and then I will conclude. This work is about taking a holistic perspective on how we interact with each other and the place we live. It's a wish for greater understanding and kindness, and I am brimming with gratitude for those who helped me during the creation of this project. Particularly large thank you to my parents, Mark and Cleo, who gave me life and taught me to live it. To my siblings, Lila, Seth, Adam, and Justin. My nieces and nephews, Corbin, Isla, Kara, and Dorian. My sister-in-law, Amy, and the rest of my family. I couldn't ask for better. Thank you to my man, Bruno, for living life outside the box with me and supporting me through the difficult process of creating this. Thanks to my dog, Yoki, who is a good boy and makes sure we go on walks almost every day. Thank you to my thesis committee, Dave Evans, Lily Seidness, and Jan Streifel. This project would have been utterly impossible without them, and their unwavering support and encouragement. They're the very best kind of people, and my life is better for knowing them. Thank you to my friends, Tammy and Cole Carter, Jessica Liddell, Jacob Barter, Miranda Chisel, June Conley, Sarah Hunt, Krista Sorensen, Paul Nicholson, and Ash Mortensen, Jack Wise, Reed Rouse, and Samantha Leach. You're a spectacular bunch. And then I'd like to thank Jeff Ellis and the Utah chapter of the National Garden Club, and the Utah Conservation Corps, who both made a huge difference in my ability to focus on this project. Thank you to Jake Powell, Carlos Sarkon, Todd Johnson, Carolyn LeBlanc, Patty Stevens, Josh Runhard, Wayne Terrasilman, and William Hochstetler for input and perspective along the way. And my deepest gratitude to Cache Valley, the waterways, the mountains, the plants, and animals. We've been through a lot to learn. Lastly, I'd like to say thank you to Frederick Olmsted, whose life story inspired me to pursue landscape architecture. Before completing my graduate degree in landscape architecture, I spent over a decade in human-scale farming, mostly in Cache Valley, and this type of farming is traditional and historically how people have farmed around the world. Farming in reciprocity with the land circumvents many of the issues that can be associated with some other modes of agricultural management. And my experience was integral to the Living Pantry project. Landscape architecture is an amazing skill set that you can use to intentionally impact the world around you. And I wanted to use my time in school to work on real-world issues and solutions to benefit my community and people in general. So I started looking at some of the most pressing problems we're experiencing both in Utah and in the nation. One, housing is unaffordable for an increasing number of people, and we need more housing stock. We've been hearing a lot about that already. Two, food insecurity is on the rise, and we're losing farmland to development. Farmers are aging and small farms disappearing, which means we're losing traditional farming skills and becoming more disconnected from our food systems. And three, this disconnection has a large impact on our environment, as agriculture is the largest consumer of water in Utah, a significant source of air pollution here in Cache Valley, and intrinsically tied to land use and health. Currently, we're not living within our ecological means. One of the most prominent examples is the dewatering of the Great Salt Lake. So I started thinking, how can we address these issues? What actually makes sense? And I looked at a bunch of existing frameworks to do this, and we're going to go through these. So new urbanism, missing middle housing and housing typologies, co-housing, pocket neighborhoods, traditional agriculture, agri-hoods, agritourism, community land trust, models, incubator kitchens, and then landscape architecture theory. And I kind of just smushed all of these together. But I'm going to talk about what they are a little bit first in my process. So this is the new urbanism transcript, and it was developed in the 80s as a planning response to the post-World War II suburban sprawl. It really explored how to design for people and diversified uses and prioritized public spaces and placemaking. Walkable neighborhoods with a strong public transit element. And mostly here we're going from a T6 over here all the way out to a T3, and we're really skipping these zones in between, which brings me to missing middle housing. This is kind of the zones in between. And it's a diverse range of housing typologies between single family and mid to high rise apartments that were commonplace in the 20s and 30s, but have largely been unbuilt since the 1940s and are mostly missing from current housing stock. They're human scale typologies, and they increase density while still giving that perception of lower density, which is important. Really close attention is paid to occupant experience, form, and using quality materials, which correlates to individual and community health. So also I looked at smaller housing typologies. Utah has the largest average home size in the nation at 2,800 square feet, but smaller homes cost less resources to build and use less resources over their lifespan. So I looked at single family homes under 1,500 square feet, and also tiny homes, which are 400 square feet. So even though there are existing standards for tiny homes, they aren't really allowed in there. They stand on the units, and I'm not really sure about the rest of Cache Valley, but I think also not. Then I looked at co-housing, which are private homes that share indoor-outdoor spaces, and shared indoor-outdoor spaces. It's active resident participation and intentional design of community for every stage of life and a variety of circumstances. So it prioritizes kind of excluding cars to the perimeter and focuses on safe, quality spaces for people. And this is almost entirely unexplored here in Utah. I looked at pocket neighborhoods. They consider home orientation, having an open side and closed side nesting for privacy and close quarters, outdoor rooms with big porches, and then cluster size for cohesive community pockets within larger neighborhoods and common space size perimeters. So traditional agriculture, which we're now kind of moving on to, is the ancient worldwide phenomenon of humans caring for the plant, animal, and fungal communities that sustain them. It's a reciprocal human scale process that requires proximity and attention to seasonal rhythms of the planet. So this is an example of that from Native American tribes. They shape the land through harvesting of plants and hunting bison herds, for example. And then Europeans brought over their own traditions, of course, with early settlers, and we can see that across the U.S. And that's kind of coming back. It's now called agri-hoods, but it's this idea of living where you're growing food. So we have agritourism, which is recreation, education, and entertainment activities that connect people to food systems and diversify a farm's income. So this can be classes or you pick, feeding chickens, goat yoga, things like that. We looked at incubator kitchens, which are fully equipped commercial kitchens and a cost-effective method for food startups of all kinds of network building and wealth building. We looked at community land trusts, which basically a nonprofit owns and manages the land while people own the individual houses and their plots are leased on that land. And they own any improvements to the building. We heard a little bit about that earlier, but this is much more affordable because it subtracts the cost of land from the building, and houses can be kept affordable in perpetuity using a resale formula. So it's not just a one-time subsidy. I incorporated several existing theories in landscape architecture, and these theories speak to the important role of beauty in creating sustainability and impacting people's ability to change, communicating functional ecology, respecting the role of sacred community spaces, and designing for pleasure. They argue for building connection and relationship to the places we inhabit and give guidelines for designing beautiful, functional, and enjoyable spaces. And so now we'll get into how I chose the site and I guess where the site is, contextualizing it. And the Logan Pantry site is approximately 100 acres in Northern Utah, here in Cache Valley. Still cafes there, if any of you know where that is. And as I've said, this is a theoretical exploration, so I don't have any rights to the land and no plans to actually do anything on it, importantly. But as you can see here, Cutler Marsh is out west. We have the Bear River, which runs to the Great Salt Lake. It's actually Salt Lake's largest tributary. Logan Canyon, Logan City, the Logan River. Historically, this was the land of the northwestern land of the Shoshone Nation, who are still living here. Our growth patterns really, I guess, took this north-south like linear form because of the mountain ranges and also from right out west. But when the train came to Logan, it really created this like hard line also that we continue to see kind of echoes of today. This is just a picture looking at from USU campus west across the valley. And so here you can see the site a little bit closer. You can see it in the context of the major roadways, which are really tying us to Wasatch Front, which is kind of, I mean, it's a really important economic center. And this is a walkability context of the site. This is a figure ground that shows really the historic development patterns. And so this here is about 3 dwelling units per acre, so it's not very dense. And here you can see a little bit of a different development pattern, which is Marindale Avenue, if anybody's familiar with that. But my project really was to create a design that could extend the existing character of the neighborhood while really increasing density. This is some of the environmental biological context of the site. The sun patterns for the winter and summer sun, the wind patterns, interaction, visual assessment of slope. And then this is a second site analysis, again, a little bit closer and just looking at what is on site, kind of opportunities and restrictions though. And here is where Cafe Sabor is, if y'all are familiar with that. And this is a development that's a little near to the site. And it is denser, it's about 15 dwelling units per acre, but there's really nothing in it that is tying this development to the place or kind of embracing that character. This is the site, the east edge of the site with the railroad. And then this is the other edge. And you can see 10th West there. This is the north edge of the site. So I took all that information basically and put it into the design process. And this is what that process looked like to begin with. I was getting input from licensed professional landscape architects, my thesis committee, and they were telling me what was working, what wasn't working. I spent a lot of time drawing and redrawing. And then by the time that I got to around here, I started putting it in the digital workflow. And I was working out things like lot configurations for housing, as well as overall master plan. So eventually, this is what came out the other side. Oh, and importantly, in my design process, because this project really was trying to consider water use, I did not use AI, which is a wonderful tool, but it's really unclear how that resource or that use of water is impacting sustainability in design. So I just went ahead and did myself a favor and excluded it. So these are the design elements. You can see them labeled here, but we have a farm store, some high tunnel production, a barn for livestock and equipment storage. Then we have this like main meadow with fruit and nut orchards, a community center, a public park. There's some composting toilets around the site. There's a mechanic shop and Makers Collective, the Great Salt Lake Splash Pad, a pollinator buffer, pathway. And then you have just like farm infrastructure, kind of these main fields that can be used for livestock or row crop production. And then a wall here that is tastefully made and planted, but to block out that sound from 10th West. And then you have revitalized wetlands on the site as well. So we're going to look a little bit closer at each of these elements. And this is the circulation pattern. The neighborhood was designed for people, so parking is really limited and roads are placed to keep cars on the periphery as much as possible. Roads are significantly narrower than the notoriously wide Utah standard, and there are no curbs to allow for stormwater collection in wide parking strips, which enhance pedestrian safety and enjoyment. There's 7 miles of pedestrian trail systems with bike parking, and not every road has a sidewalk, as the pedestrian circulation system connects the whole site, with pedestrian walking blocks being no more than 300 square feet. So these are a couple of the streetscapes, and they have key maps to the side to show where on the site they are. This is the main road, and it has really wide pathways for people, so we can quickly move through the site that way. These are the roads around the common area in Orchard. So the pathways are adjacent to where they're across from residential, and then you have Orchard over here. A few connector streets, and then the residential streets, which again have limited parking. And I'm portraying the parking as uncovered here, but it would be really easy to put up like a more flexible kind of lighter structure for parking, like an awning or something like that, since covered parking is really more ideal in our climate. So agricultural piece, there's 33 acres of productive farmland in this. That's 1,772 fruit trees and fruit trees. There's 14 core acres for small livestock and row crop production. There's food processing and storage, as well as office space and tool equipment and vehicle storage. There's 19 neighborhood commons, and that's about 11 acres of food forest and community garden flex space, which I'll talk a little bit more about. There's 4 acres of seed production pollinator buffer, and 2.5 acres of revitalized wetlands on the site. So the agricultural areas are designed to be human scale and work within the ecology and limitations of Logan. Management is aligned with traditional agricultural wisdom and resource-saving technology like drip irrigation, and pesticides are excluded just for the health of everyone living there. All of these areas are managed by professional farmers and would be part of that nonprofit community land trust and the working farm. And again, these flex spaces here are areas that residents could use, but go back into the farm and then managed professionally if residents can't be able to do that. So let's see. We used a couple of different things in the design, which were food forests, and that's basically creating a layer of trees, shrubs, and perennials, and some has vines to create a productive ecology. And they're beautiful, and once established, provide a low maintenance alternative to other types of food production and landscaping. So planting food forests right outside people's doors establishes a relationship with eating and growing things straight from the source, and is an opportunity to reconnect with the environment that sustains us. Animals, wild or domestic, have always played a large supporting role for soil health and plant health. And a great example of this is the large herds of bison that used to roam North America. But animal waste fertilizes and adds organic matter to the soil, while the hoofprints or scratching behavior in the case of chickens creates microclimates. Grazing can really revitalize plants and poultry, which is notoriously good at pest control. Presence of animals only really becomes detrimental when they're mismanaged by humans. So urban culture is designed with small livestock and poultry in rotation with row crops to create a balanced system that benefits each part of it. And then the farm again is designed with that allows technology and expanding and providing site to collect and filter stormwater from the site and providing habitat for birds, fish, amphibians, small rodents, and insects while connecting us to the valley marshlands. This is a common green flex space, and again, I have a key map out here to the side. So these really create pockets within the larger neighborhood, they're at a minimum 30 feet wide, where friends can meet up, children can play, people can garden, read a book, graze on the food forest nearby, or just sit around and watch the clouds. They include a dollop of turf grass here in case you want some playground equipment, and a patio with a place for community art, community gardens, food forest plantings, a neighborhood compost, tool storage, and covered bike parking. This is an example of the flex space again. And it is incorporated back into the larger farm if need be. This is the pollinator buffer, and having space dedicated to seed production is a vital piece of local and regional food security as seeds adapt to thrive in the environments they're grown in. Leaving seed structures and stems on plants from fall to early spring can provide seasonal interest without disturbing pollinator habitats. And placing it adjacent to trails was really important to create an opportunity for passive education and allow people to see the splendor of the pollinators at work in the ecosystem. So now we'll look at housing and public spaces. The neighborhood provides a wide variety of outdoor and indoor spaces that consider a vast range and depth of human experience. So there are 3.9 acres of public open space and parks, 3 composting toilets, 600 homes affordable in perpetuity, which equals out to be about 19.4 dwelling units per acre. Which is roughly estimated to be around 13% of our current housing deficit or housing. Those 457 residential fruit trees, this entire life accessible living. There's a community center, No Mud, No Lettuce Park, the Maple Collective and Bike Mechanic, a Great Salt Lake Splash Pad, Green Meadow, Farm Store, and the Flex Space. The public spaces really help connect the neighborhood to Logan City and invite the larger community in, while smaller pockets are more for resident-oriented and resident use. And our public spaces are exceeding also accessibility standards. These are the 4 housing typologies I settled on, building off missing housing typologies and then extending that also into smaller single-family and tiny homes. And then toying around with dividing lots and configurations of setbacks, parking, and trees. But the typologies can really be played with to suit the site you're working with. And I also just learned that there is a Utah missing housing toolkit, which is amazing. So I looked at housing orientation, obviously, as well. And in addition to passive solar, there's opportunity to include solar panels on open sides with the most sun exposure. And houses are all oriented with their fronts to the common green. This is an enlargement of the community center with the orchard, and it's kind of the heart of the Living Pantry neighborhood. It includes incubator kitchen and kitchen garden, and there's room for the community to meet and indoor-outdoor gathering space for all seasons. It has a large dining room, common rooms, classrooms, and a loft with a mountain view, gym, guest rooms for visitors, 2 full bathrooms, and a laundry room to support the 10 residents. RV parking allows for visitors to stop a while on their way to one of the world famous national parks, and accommodates buses for school groups. The farm store is really an opportunity for farmers to sell produce and other residents to sell produce or value-added products. So it's strengthening the local economy and food security. It's a convenient route from anywhere in the neighborhood. It also has parking for bikes, RVs, and cars. And it's located here to the northern entrance, so it kind of gives a good entryway for visitors to stop by and interact with the working farm. And the Great Salt Lake Splash Pad aims to connect everyone who plays there with the understanding that water is deeply impacted by agriculture. And in Cache Valley, there are stories of the Great Salt Lake's largest tributary, the Logan. Our water management is intrinsically tied to our own health and directly impacts our downstream neighborhoods and the health of the Great Salt Lake. So the splash pad includes 2 pavilions with water murals and educational signage, and a composting toilet and water-loving plants. This is No Mud, No Lotus Park, and it's inspired by the late Buddhist monk and civil rights activist Thich Nhat Hanh. It's a social fugal space for people to go when they are craving solitude, or experiencing emotions that can be difficult and be stigmatized by society. So maybe those are grief, anger, fear, anxiety, and sadness. It's an acknowledgement that those feelings are part of being human, perhaps especially in 2025, and ignoring and marginalizing these emotions causes societal suffering, while bringing awareness to them connects and heals us. So the park includes many trees, a walking library, contemplation pavilion, a disconnected phone booth for calling loved ones who have passed, and places to lay on the ground, the Thomas and tree. So, in conclusion, in both Utah and the United States, we are dealing with unprecedented challenges in both housing and food security. Even as our natural resources dwindle, our climate changes, and people, disproportionately the most vulnerable among us, are failing to get their basic needs of food and shelter met. These challenges have been created by the prevalent approaches in housing and food systems applied over the last several decades and exacerbated by explosive population growth. These issues are often treated separately and segregated from the bigger picture, when in reality they are interwoven, and any hope of addressing them will be found looking at things holistically. Luckily, we have a strong foundation of previous expert research and wisdom to build on, and synthesizing all of these various frameworks. This thesis imagines a new model that is both holistic and thoughtful. It's a roadmap to alternative housing development in northern Utah that includes agriculture to increase food security, reconnect us with our food systems, and celebrate the land while providing attainable and affordable housing for people of all sorts in perpetuity. It envisions not just how to provide structures for people, but actually homes for them. So, although the Living Pantry was designed for a specific site in northern Utah, the framework could be applied to many places and on many scales wherever food and homes are needed. Thank you.
If you win the election for mayor and then have an opportunity to build the living pantry on a different site, will you take it?
I don't know. That's not something I'm going to discuss right now.
Okay.
Sorry. Other questions?
We've got a lot of great ideas here, and I remember even studying this same site when I was on the council. Okay, and so there's a lot of good things. The question is, how could you get this implemented? I mean, obviously, somebody would have to build it, and the market would have to pay for it.
Yeah.
And I mean, unless you think of the city subsidizing whatever, So, have you tested this with a realistic developer that said, "Yeah, this would pencil out, this would work"?
Yeah, I mean, I actually have several. I should take this back. It's recording. Yeah. So I've talked to developers who have expressed interest. We have not sat down yet. This is pretty fresh. I just graduated a few months ago, so we haven't actually sat down and seen if it will pencil. But with how much density it is, it seems like it definitely could. And there are people interested in that, like, I think it's a starting point rather than an ending point, but to have visual representation of what that could look like really allows you to start saying, does this work or not, without investing in something that absolutely won't.
Density, excuse me. I grew up in Milwaukee, and to some degree, that was a more socialistic community where they would have smaller private properties and then large parks, which came out of Germany, which was, the model. And it works really well. But people have to pay for it somewhere. They're going to pay for it through smaller properties and still have high cost. And then you have the benefits of the park and the walkways and everything. I just wondered, it seems, what density do you have for the overall property?
Yeah, so it was at about 19. It was at about 19.4 dwelling units per acre. Yeah, when I figured this out, and that's about 600 homes, and then about 40% of the land was in production. So the farm and even the land below the houses is all in the community land trust as a nonprofit. So that's like a business entity, which I think could be a really attractive proposition for developers too. It's just kind of, I guess, finding people who want to invest in those type of ideas. But I don't think that any of these things that I'm proposing are like just fantasies, I think it could work.
Just more of a couple of comments. I appreciate your question about whether this is economically feasible, but I've given a lot of thought to agricultural issues in relation to development, and I actually think one of the reasons why we're in the situation we are from a long arc of history moment is because we don't raise our own food on our own property. What happens when you do that is you separate what's perceived to be value of a home from a lower value property of growing, and so you get an increase in residential properties, and that's artificial, and not as high of a property on agricultural properties value is, as if if you combine them back together, it moderates the prices because you're not reflecting the true cost of development when you can't, development's worth nothing if you can't eat, right? So the point is that by disconnecting them, we lose that reality. And I think that has led to some of the problems in our market. A second comment is just that one thing that might be worth exploring is HOAs have been developed with very unique provisions for crop production. So that's another tool that you can use as a assisting mechanism to get agriculture grown on a property in a sustainable way in terms of human motivation and governance. So anyway.
As Logan Mayor, are there a few parts of this plan that you could see implemented in the city within the first couple of years, or like things to start with?
Yeah, I think that's really how it takes some time to look at. I think, like Tom has just said, it would take investors and private investors. So I don't think that it's something that a city can really look at doing completely on its own. But, Moab is a really good example of a community land trust that has been very, very successful in addressing affordable housing. And so I think that that's promising to look at how they did that. And all of these things, I mean, somebody is doing them successfully somewhere, and oftentimes it's not that far away from where we are. So I think we just start to have conversations around what that could actually look like and identify spaces for that. Then we could go some really exciting places here in Cache Valley and in Utah. Any other questions?
So there's a lot of like farming and you have some orchards as well. Who's going to look after those? Like, is this going to be community? Is this going to be you're going to hire a farmer to come out here and look after these plots? Is this done through an HOA? Like because people have busy lives, we all have jobs and stuff that we got to attend to, and most people are not going to be able to look after this much land on their own. So I'm a little bit curious about that perspective.
Yeah, so this would definitely be cared for by professional farmers. I think there's no question of that. There is opportunity for residents to have community garden space in these flex areas. But even that, if a resident can't do that for whatever reason, it goes back into the larger farm and is managed professionally by the farmers, and that's part of like the community land trust nonprofit on the neighborhood or in the neighborhood development. No, those costs are separate because the farm is its own business entity. So that's part of the beauty of the community land trust model is that costs of land are not passed on to homeowners. So people would be buying the homes there and owning those. They wouldn't be responsible for paying for the land, and that cost would be dropped from the where that's part of what makes it affordable.
Will you let me know when you're hiring?
Yes.
Just a simple question about zoning. How do you zone something like that?
Oh yeah, that's a great question. And I think it would probably take a lot of time and working really closely with the zoning commissions and the city councils and just the entire city government. There's things in here zoning for housing and there's things in here zoning for agriculture that are definitely not in line with existing codes. So yeah, it would be a journey. I think.
If you show, that's the trouble. Sometimes our process is backwards. They say, well, it's a NR6 or whatever it is. So then you just plaster it with houses. So there's no creativity to it. But if you bring in a plan, then you really have to have a council that's open to that type of thing where you say, let's see the vision, but that takes money for the developer or the planner or the architect to do. So who pays for that? You know what I'm saying? It's our current system is somewhat backward, and but it can be reversed. I've seen it done where you show the plan from the beginning.
Yeah, I mean, I think having like a visual representation so that everyone's kind of on the same page about what's being talked about. It's hard to have a conversation if I looked at this without having put a bunch of time into the plan. I would say like, well, I don't know how many schools there, what that looks like. It's confusing already because it's such a complex issue. But I mean, this is
is much cheaper than just building it and trying to see or trying to
Yeah.
figure it out without a plan. And so I think like when we talk about housing affordability, starting to invest in some things like this that are cheaper, I mean, if you feel it, you feel it.
This would be far more beneficial to the whole community, but it takes somebody with vision, and then the planning commission needs to work with you. And that's what I'm saying. I started dealing with something like this, but it takes a lot of time to invest. That's a lot of money
Yeah.
for you.
So we're having finding certain.
Yeah.
But thank you, Juan, for again. It's very clear to there's a ton of interest in so thank you again. We can give a lot of interact. Now this is like it's products. Feel free to ask. Hey, you're not asking questions. Don't want to shut down this conversation.
I don't know if you knew, but I used to be on the city council.